Welcome to the Bulletin Bytes, your podcast from the Bulletin Box. I'm your host, Ivana. Thank you, the Bulletin Box, for inviting me over to host today's discussion on such an imperative topics related to mental wellness. I have with me Dr. Manjiri Deshpande Shenoy. Dr. Manjiri is an MBBS, DNB in psychiatry with a fellowship in child psychiatry. She's passionately interested in child, adolescent, and young adult psychiatry. Dr. Manjiri is the head of a chain of child and adolescent guidance clinic, Indla's Child Guidance Clinic, which has branches in Mumbai, Vijayawada, and Vizag. Dr. Manjiri has a team of multidisciplinary staff in this clinic to cater to diverse academic, emotional, and behavioral needs of children and younger generation, which include testing and therapies. She's the convener for School Mental Health, Indian Association of Private Psychiatry. Dr. Manjiri believes her role is not only treating mental illness, but also promoting mental wellness. Welcome, Dr. Manjiri. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivana, for that wonderful introduction. I'm truly humbled. And thank you, Bulletin Box, for giving me the opportunity to be the speaker on such a very important topic. This topic is extremely close to my heart. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
I'm also looking forward to the discussion and to hear more about what you do. So you may be aware that childhood and adolescent is a very critical stage in our brain development. So when in this time we have any early negative experiences, either at home, at school, or in digital spaces, such as exposure to violence, bullying, or isolation, like it happened during the pandemic, this could cause a profound impact on our children and adolescent well-being. And if it's not detected early, it could carry consequences long-term to their adulthood. So it's very important that at this stage, parents are able to identify early if there is any mental health concern. But despite their good intentions, sometimes parents don't have the right knowledge or tools to do so. So Dr. Manjiri, I'm curious to know, how can parents identify if their children or adolescent need some help?
Thank you for that question, Ivana. Yeah, so more than 50% of adult psychological problems actually begin before the age of 14 years. So that's why it's extremely important to understand mental health of children and adolescents. Parents, of course, want their best for their children. Parents can understand physical illnesses extremely easily. It's easy to catch physical illnesses. There are various ways that we diagnose physical illnesses through tests, scans, etc. However, our psychological illnesses are more like invisible illnesses, nothing from the outside, but a lot brimming inside. And that's why it's extremely difficult to understand, even if your old child is going through a psychological illness. However, there are some signs that you can watch for, and parents need to be aware of some of these signs. So generally, from the age groups of 0 to 3, that is the infancy years, that's when the child is just developing his milestones. So any kind of delay in any milestone is a sign of trouble, and that's when you need to go to a doctor. If your child is between 3 to 6 years, that's when the emotions are beginning to develop. That's when the child's speech and language, social skills are beginning to develop. And that's when we see behavioral problems in children like hyperactivity, aggression, defiance, etc. As the child grows older, academics take on the center stage. So between 6 to 12 years of age, academic issues are seen most commonly. Learning disabilities are something that we diagnose at this age. Intellectual disability is something that we can easily diagnose at this age. And above 12 years of age, that's when we see a host of mood and emotional problems. So how does a parent identify these problems? So you know your child, you know your child's routine, you know your child's schedule. So any sudden changes in a child which last for more than, say, a week can be important to notice and pay more attention to. So if your child has been of late more irritable, just getting angry for small reason, appears sad, is withdrawing from his activities. So your child loved playing football or your child loved playing the piano, but you can see your child just, shying away from the piano, not going to football, not wanting to go and meet his friend, is constantly worried, asks you questions like, are you okay? Do you have to go to office? Can you stay at home? If your child seems to be having multiple physical complaints, repeated stomach ache, repeated headache, you've gone to the doctors, but everything seems fine. If your normally behaving child and well-behaved child is suddenly getting aggressive or defiant and is getting physically or verbally aggressive, then yes, it could be a sign that he is going through something. Repeated temper tantrums for a child, which are much more than his usual. Disturbances in sleep are extremely important. So most of our psychological problems definitely show a disturbance in their sleep and their eating habits. So these are some of the signs that you could watch out for, especially according to his age. And if these changes are persisting and are interfering with his daily life, that's the time maybe your child could be going through something. So you seek help from a professional.
Thank you so much for explaining all of this. So basically, parents should look out for any change, for any drastic change on their child behavior and attitude. But what can be the trigger for all of this situation?
So what does a child want, or what does a child's brain to develop normally need? Yes, tender loving care from his parents, a safe environment generally, and good health. Some of these could at times be endangered. So any stressful things going on at home. So we see a lot of children and suffering emotionally. And when we talk to the parents, we understand that the parents are going through severe interpersonal problems, family issues, sometimes poverty, not having the basic needs. If the child is going to school, yes, the child could be being bullied at school, is being abused elsewhere. These are potential triggers for a psychological issue. Of course, we do take into account family history because most of the psychological disorders are also genetic in nature. So if you or your partner had a history of any psychological condition or somebody in your first generation had, yes, your child could be at more risk. And that's when these are some of the triggers for psychological problems in children and adolescents.
Thank you. This is very interesting. So issue could come from home, but could come also from school. Bullying is very common these days. So how can we identify when a child has been bullied or has had some emotional abuse? What are the typical signs of that?
Yeah, child abuse is something that is one of the most difficult things to deal with in our clinical practice. Abuse could be of different types. It could be physical abuse, it could be emotional abuse, it could be sexual abuse or plain neglect. So just neglecting the basic needs of a child is also included in abuse. Why? Because the same signs could be seen. So if you see a child who is withdrawing from his activities, who appears sad, is getting more irritable, does not want to go to school, is having frequent pains of some kind, is crying, is deteriorating in studies. So the child who loved studying and was doing really well, but is not studying anymore, repeated mistakes, etc. in his papers, not wanting to go to school. These could be some of the signs that he is being abused at school. For physical abuse, of course, the signs are more noticeable. So if you see unexplained cuts and bruises on your child, yes, the child could be physically abused. But when it comes to emotional or sexual abuse, of course, these are more hidden. The child may not open up, but the child, through their play, at times we see, the typical play of a child gets disturbed. So a child who used to play very normally for 2-3 hours now, goes away from play, does not want to engage in play or has the repeated kind of play. These could be some of the signs that the child is being abused somewhere.
Thank you so much. This is super interesting. And this is applied for bullying as well. Or are there any particular sign to identify if your child is being bullied by other children?
I think one of the most important complications of bullying that a child faces is low self-esteem. So when you see a child having a lot of issues with self-confidence, just doesn't think well of himself, you tell your child to participate in anything and your child says, I just can't do it, mom, I can't do it. This could be a sign that he's bullied. He thinks very poorly of himself. He says he's no good. He doesn't look good. He doesn't feel good about himself. The reason could be he's being bullied, being ridiculed, being made fun of in school or elsewhere in the building or whatever. And that's the reason they become clingy to their parents. They don't want to make friends. They have separation anxiety. They only want to be with their parents all the time because they're facing a stressful situation outside home.
Thank you so much. This is super interesting for me and for all our parents in the audience. So what are the most common issues that you are encountering recently at your practice?
So if you talk about recently, yes, during the pandemic, I would say for us as psychiatrists, the number of cases that I saw pre-pandemic have just doubled. My work has just increased multifold in the pandemic because so many children and adolescents seem to be suffering due to this whole pandemic. I mean, of course, as adults, we suffer too. But for children, most of their awake hours used to be outside home, used to be in school, where they socialize, where they hang out with their friends, where they have extracurricular activities. The pandemic took away all this. The constant exposure to parents, being 24/7 with parents also is not good for kids. I keep telling parents, don't be helicopter parents, don't be with your child 24/7. It could be suffocating your child. The unnecessary and unsupervised exposure to screens has become a major problem in the pandemic. I'm sure we'll discuss this in detail, but yes, these are some of the reasons. And I think in the whole pandemic, especially teenagers was the age group that I saw most. Depression, anxiety, social anxiety, etc. And especially now, as we're moving to a near normal life and things are opening up, especially in India now, from December, most of the schools are going to open up and children's are going to get back to their school life, their college life. A lot of teenagers are coming in saying that they don't want to go to school. They don't want to go to college. They want to just continue online class. Why? I mean, we thought they would be happy because they've got so comfortable in their spaces, staying at their home. They didn't have to deal with the social anxiety. They didn't have to deal with people physically, look eye to eye into people. So they were much better and much comforted. But when they think of going back to school where they have to meet 40, 50 kids, interact with teachers, if they were bullied in the past, all those things are going to come as flashbacks. So they want to stay away. And social anxiety, especially children and adolescents who suffer from social anxiety, are going to have a big exacerbation in the days to come now as we move back to our normal lives.
So social anxiety and depression is on the rise, not only in the adult population, but also between children and adolescents. What can the parents do in order to deal with a child that is showing signs of anxiety? If they don't want to go back to school, how can they support them in this?
Now, first, I think for parents, it's very important to accept that your child has a psychological illness. I think it takes a great deal of courage and, it's very difficult, I think, for parents to accept. So, most likely in my clinic, when I tell parents your child has this problem, say has depression or anxiety, the first reaction that most 90% of parents give is, but why my child? I've given my child the best of everything. I've provided the best food. We have the best house. We've taken him for holidays. What is lacking? Why is my child having depression? Or, it's very difficult for parents to accept that in spite of you doing your best and trying to be the best parent, your child could still have a psychological illness. The second thing is this needs to be treated. So first, yes, at your home end, be there for your child. Don't ridicule your child. Don't label your child. Don't tell him you could do this on your own, or, you're just weak, or you're not strong enough. Show a little more willpower. No, these are demeaning statements and they go down very badly with the child. So just making your child feel heard and accepted, that I understand your condition. I can imagine what you're going through and we're going to get through this together. I think only that one statement will make the world of a difference in your child's life. And yes, maybe when it's too extreme, that's the time you seek help of a mental health professional, be it a counselor, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. Yes, help is available.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I hear empathy is a big one that parents should have, and put themselves in their child's shoes, because sometimes they have very good intention, but then the impact is a bit different. So what can parents do to prevent all of this to happen? What can they do in order to make sure they do their best to grow their children and their adolescent the best way, and perhaps we can prevent this mental health issue from happening?
Yes, so I think all psychological illnesses might not be preventable, but yes, there's a lot that parents can do at their end. providing that safe space for your child or your adolescent to come and speak to you. Yes, being there for your child unconditionally, being supportive of your child's decisions, being supportive of your child's needs and desires at that time, and understanding, speaking to your child on a daily basis, understanding what your child could be going through. So, for that, it's important to understand your child, to speak to your child daily. No, and when your child starts opening up, or you see changes in your child which are going on for more than, say, a week, then that's the time you sit down and have an honest discussion with your child. Be patient, let your child take time to open up to you. But I'm quite sure most kids, given that space and given that freedom, they will open up to their parents.
So communication is a key, being there for your kid and truly listen to them without expecting to know everything, but just be there for your child is very important. So thank you for sharing this. You mentioned earlier that because of the pandemic, screen time has been increased nowadays. So what could be the consequence of children and adolescent well-being if their screen time is so much these days?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Ivana, that's something that we're dealing with and grappling with on a daily basis. So ideally, the guidelines for all us, the Indian Psychiatric Society or the APA guidelines, the American Psychiatric Society, we all have guidelines which say that less than 2 years of age, ideally, no screen time. Between 2 to 5 years of age, just 1 hour of screen time. And yes, maybe 5 to 12 years of age, maybe about 2 hours of screen time. That's what is recommended. Now, the lockdown has actually broken all these rules. In India, we had online school, and I used to see even 3-year-old, 4-year-old sit for 1 hour on the screen. And of course, because the parents were working from home, working at home, the exposure to screens has increased. And I think no child, especially above 5, 6 years of age now, spends less than 2 or 3 hours online. Again, I think that can be preventable, but for parents, most parents, it's an easy way out. It's that time that they get to at their homes, and some of them are obviously helpless when it comes to managing their children. If they're managing alone and no domestic help, it becomes extremely difficult to manage your kids. But yes, because of this, in the lockdown, I've seen such sad state of affairs. I've seen kids as young as 8-year-olds exposed to stuff that they should have not seen before 18. And children's brains are not mature enough to handle it. So the child never wants to do it. It's not intentional. Your child is, randomly playing on the mobile or randomly watching a YouTube video or something. And then these pop-up boxes come on the child's screen and the child just starts clicking one after the other. And you don't know what could lead to. I had an example in my clinic where a young girl, very young girl of 10-year-old, she watched something that I guess even after 18 or 20 is when you could watch it. Very, very difficult stuff for her brain to process. Sexual content, of course. Mm-hmm. And the child just could not tolerate it. After that, for 3 months, she did not tell her parents because she feared that her parents would shout at her for watching something. Can't blame the child. I mean, that would be anybody's natural reaction. But she went through such immense guilt. Her studies started deteriorating. She got extremely defiant at home. She got very aggressive with her parents. Her whole behavior went for a toss 360 degree. The parents brought her in thinking that it's some kind of oppositional defiant disorder that needs treatment, and the whole family environment was spoiled. When I started speaking to the child, did I realize after a couple of sessions that this was the main reason, where she finally opened up and said, I feel so guilty. I feel like killing myself every single day, because I watched something that I should not have, and I just can't tell my parents about this. So over a period of time, helping her to open up to her parents, making sure that she reduced the guilt in her, because it wasn't really her fault, helped her. So these kind of cases have increased. There are children who have got into such severe gaming addiction. There are a lot of video games that are extremely addictive. They are made in such a way that you just can't stop playing them. So I have teenagers who are doing extremely well in academics, 90+% students doing really well, going to go, hoping to get into the best colleges for graduation, etc. And online school, online college, they just got used to playing video games. And now these kids have just forgotten what academics is. They're hooked on to their video games for more than 12 hours. There are cases where the child has hit the parents because the parent tried to take away the mobile. That's how addictive, and the child is just helpless. Till the child receives the proper care, child is helpless. So I think these are some of the repercussions of the pandemic and increased screen use in children and adolescents.
Thank you so much for sharing this case study. And it's indeed a tricky situation for the parents, especially if they are at home working and they have to entertain children. So it's easier to give them a mobile phone or tablet in order to keep them at bay. But as you share with us, that could have such profound consequences. So it's something parents should really be mindful about. Thank you so much for sharing this. And as we come into an end of our discussion, do you have any final tips you can give to our parents?
So a lot of parents, sometimes when I say I'm a child psychiatrist or that we do parenting sessions, often ask me, what's the best tip or what's the best parenting tip that you can give? And my general statement to them is there are no perfect parents, there are no perfect children, but there are a lot of perfect moments along the way. And it's about identifying those little moments and making time for your child. It's never about quantity time. So a lot of us are working parents. I'm a mother to a 3-year-old, and yes, it does eat me up many times that I'm working 10 hours away from my child, etc. But I believe that it's more about quality time, that you spend that 1 or 2 hours, but make it meaningful. So parenting is a wonderful experience. Yes, but children and adolescents can be going through stuff you can't imagine. So just be open, be aware, read up yourself, know about mental health, know about the signs of mental illnesses so that you can be the first to identify. Because all these illnesses, if they are identified early and treatment is started early, the prognosis is very good. But if we delay it, yes, it could lead to a whole load of complications after that.
Thank you so much. I love your expression. There are no perfect parents, but there are perfect moments. So I'm pretty sure parents can shred a little bit of their guilt they may feel because, each of us want to be a perfect parent, but there is no such a thing. So it's important to focus on quality time. Even if we know with our kids 100% of the time, let's make sure that that time counts and is meaningful time we spend with them. Thank you so much. This is such a good advice for our parents from home. I've been so excited to hear from you and your experience. It's been super interesting today. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. Thank you. It's been super interesting for me to learn from you.
Thank you, Ivana. You've been a wonderful host. The way you ask questions, it just makes it easy for the interview. And thank you, Bulletin Box, for giving us this opportunity. And I hope this benefits a lot of viewers.
Thank you so much. I hope this talk was helpful for you. And do subscribe to the Bulletin Box if you want to support this campaign and help widen awareness. Thank you for listening to the second episode of the Bulletin Bytes on well-being. Stay healthy and happy.